Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, as I take more of your questions in a segment of Ask Judy. John Dayton is joining me with some more kind of set things and answering some questions that came up in some episodes. And he says, I just watched The Woman in its entirety in another wonderful episode of the show. The Westham train station was located behind the Rockfish set, which was on the back lot of Warner Brothers. That was sort of the area where we would sometimes see the sheriff's office or the bus depot, things like that. So somewhere back in there, they shot, it would have been more like where the train station office was or something like that. And then the train car was located at Travel Town, which is a hop, skip, and a jump over the LA River from our back lot. It's over near Griffith Park, which people may have heard of, and where there's the big observatory up at the top of Griffith Park, where they shot sequences from, what was it? It wasn't East of Eden. It was one of the James Dean movies. Anyway, so Griffith Park is a really large park in the between Burbank and Hollywood and that area. So there is a place called Travel Town, and they have all these train cars and things like that. Harvey, who was the director on that episode, Harvey Laidman, was so clever. Notice he pushed into the train station, so the camera went in with the camera, brilliantly then dissolved into a matching push into the train car. So those would have been edited together cleverly. So they were partially on the back lot and then editing with things that they shot at actual Travel Town with the train cars. It absolutely looked like the same location. Could have fooled me if I hadn't been there. I also noticed that Richard's scene at the flower cart was shot on our back lot, French Street, in the exact spot where Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman shot the exterior sidewalk scenes in Casablanca. How cool is that for a piece of history? So much wonderful history on the Warner Brothers lot. And by the way, that wasn't me as a student crossing from the hallway into the classroom. Sorry about that. Anyway, it was just, it's always great when John can give me these little pieces of information about scenes that I wasn't there when they were shot. So thanks, John, for once again giving some insight into the movie magic. This question is from Devacac 100. I have a question about scenes involving cars. When the scene involved people talking while hanging around the car but not driving, was this filmed indoors or outdoors? That would be filmed outdoors. It would be filmed wherever the location was supposed to be. If we were in the front yard or we were, on the street in town or things like that. Yeah, all those things shot outside. Then, and when it involved watching someone drive away, was that filmed outdoors? Yes, that would have been filmed outdoors. So someone jumping in the car and driving off would have been shot on the back lot or wherever the location was. I would hope outdoors, as it would emit a lot of carbon monoxide indoors. If a car was supposed to move inside, a lot of times they would put a rope on it, and but they would drive them. They had big bay doors on the sound stages, so they could drive them into, usually, the big doors would be open at that point. So we didn't do a lot of turning on engines on and off inside the sound stage by any means. But every once in a while, we did have an inside location where cars were parked, where you could see them, and they created an area of dirt and gravel on the ground, and we just happened to be shooting on a sound stage for some reason. Yeah, but they wouldn't be starting up cars and stuff like that. And then you had a second question. I love how the Waltons addressed segregation, discrimination, etc. Most of the Waltons characters seem to have had at least one opportunity to stand up for a Black person or another person of color throughout. And they always stood on the side of justice.
And in our patriotic fervor, we sometimes fail to realize that those freedoms were too often not evenly distributed. My father found himself in the vanguard of the battle for equality and freedom that was so long overdue in America.
I loved that about the Waltons too, that what we represented was always acceptance and tolerance and inclusion and justice. Yes, for what was right. That was a hallmark of our show, and I think we were all very proud of that. So I'd love a behind this, I don't know, a behind the scenes segment on how featuring Black characters came about during the 1970s. I don't know that I could really say how that came about. That would have come more from our creators, and the stories that were presented, and the stories that they decided to tell. What type of reaction do we get from viewers? I don't ever remember getting any kind of anything, but we love the show, and we love that you take on all sorts of topics. So I couldn't say that people appreciating that we addressed different issues was mostly what I remember the reaction being. Was there resistance from many party sponsors, funders, producers? No, I don't remember there ever being that. If there was, it was nothing I ever heard about. I noted that Verdi and her family are featured a few times per season, but they don't always show up for an all-cast show. For example, they never came to the Founders' Day celebration, nor were they involved with housing any of the Waltons during the burnout. I think some of that became more, a lot of that stuff was budget. Why were some characters in some episodes and not others? I think it's just strictly numbers, because we couldn't always, they didn't have the budget to have every supporting recurring member of the community present at everything. So oftentimes the people who were present were people who had other scenes within an episode. And so they were already contracted for that episode. So they brought them in. But yes, it would have been wonderful to have a lot of our supporting characters around far more often. And it was always a treat to have Lynn Hamilton and Hal Williams and Todd Bridges and, members of our extended, Walton community. And it was also an era where, still in the 30s and 40s, where segregation still existed. So we did touch on that in things like buses or places. And certainly we touched on that in episodes with Verdi's daughter when she came back trying to get work. So I think that it may have been also, without making a point of it, just dealing with the realities of the time, that not that our families wouldn't interact, but that in some locations that we were at, it might not be interracial because of the era. I don't know. This is just me completely speculating. There was never a full-on explanation, and because it wasn't a part of my life, feeling, having an awareness of there still being segregation, I don't think I ever really thought about it as, why aren't there? It was just, I grew up in a very unsegregated area like LA. It was just, it was a melting pot. There was all kinds of ethnicities represented around there. So I never thought twice about, there's someone who's different than me. So it just wasn't on my radar. Thanks for joining me for this segment of Ask Judy. I'll be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.